Hey everyone, so I have to apologize, because while this was a very shocking and surprising chapter with many revelations, I did unfortunately spoil you all on it 9 months ago when I dropped this video about how the true world of One Piece is buried under the sea. That's right, okay, so this is easily one of the biggest reveals in the entire story of One Piece, which is why I'm definitely going to give myself a big pat on the back for that theory, which you can watch now and see just how well it holds up down to a T practically with exactly what Vegapunk is talking about this chapter, about how the entire world of One Piece was drastically different 800, 900 years ago before the Great Void Century War occurred, and what we're seeing now today is just a shell of what the world once was. And in that video I put together a bunch of different clues from throughout the story, from Wano's geography to Jinbei's cover story with the ancient ruins, to the reason that Roger laughed and wanted to live in the type of world that Joy Boy lived in when he was alive. The clues have been there from throughout the beginning of the story. It's just that, I don't know, I'm very happy that I was able to piece them together in that elaborate video and then get to see it come to fruition when it's revealed beat for beat that yes, that is precisely what happened in the past, and the true world of One Piece is exactly as exciting and grand as we speculated on 9 months ago. So that makes me especially happy because recently I've been putting out many videos talking about the Void Century as well as what's going to come with the Great Flood, between the video talking about exactly how One Piece ends and how the Mother Flame represents the Will of D. Both of these videos stack on top of the ideas of that true world of One Piece theory video, a video that just got confirmed to be correct, and I believe that both of these videos elaborate on 1, what the future of the world is going to look like, and 2, why the Void Century War was fought. So I feel like in recent times we've really been piecing together on this channel some of the grander endgame aspects of One Piece and how the whole big picture is going to fit together, what we're going to see at the end of the story, the gaps that are going to be filled in that 800 to 900 year ago Void Century, and most importantly, with the information that we just got from Vegapunk, next week's video, I think we can finally understand why the Void Century War happened and the way that it fits with all the previous theories that have been coming out with this channel. I think the why for what started the war, what was the cause behind it all, is actually very, very clear, so I hope you all look forward to next Tuesday's video. If you're excited, if you've been a long-time viewer of this channel and you're happy to see that true world of One Piece video did turn out to be the truth, well, wait for next week's video. And soon what I want to do is one grand video connecting all of the ideas into one and explaining how everything sort of fits together, but we're not quite there yet. So watch out for next Tuesday's video, because that should break down the truth of what happened in the Void Century and what really caused it. Now, before we get any further, I have to congratulate Jing Freaks, my stream viewer, for correctly predicting that Joy Boy's silhouette would be seen in this chapter. For those of you who don't know, from now on, every break week, that Monday's stream, we're going to be hosting a predictions competition where you can join chat and submit your predictions for what will happen in the next chapter, as Jing Freaks predicted for 1115, and whoever gets an accurate prediction, they get shouted out in the following week's chapter review. So make sure to join in next break week stream. This week the only winner was Jing Freaks, so congrats to you, dude. It is hard getting chapter predictions right. Oda is always very unpredictable. But yes, Joy Boy's silhouette was seen. So congrats, man, and moving on. So all of that aside, let's talk about the chapter itself. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't actually have a ton to say on Vegapunk's revelations this chapter because, seriously, most of what he talked about this chapter was already discussed in that video that I dropped, so these are already ideas that I believe to be true. The idea that the islands that we're seeing right now are just fragments of what the world once was, the fact that over the course of the Void Century, events occurred that caused the sea levels to drastically rise. Now, we did get the detail that it was 200 meters to be precise, so now we know that the true world of One Piece is 200 meters below. But we learned that the water levels rose, that was already speculated on. We saw glimpses of ancient ruins that, again, I've talked about since Jinbei's cover story. We've already been getting hints about those sort of things. And really just, there was nothing truly new that Vegapunk revealed other than the fact that who was in the right, who was in the wrong in the Void Century War seems to be ambiguous without Vegapunk having all the pieces of information. As Vegapunk explains, he does not have access to all the poneglyphs, but I will be covering what happened there and what the missing pieces are, the information that Vegapunk is missing, in next Tuesday's video, so I'm going to save that for here. I think what is interesting to talk about is the events of the chapter happening with the Gorosei and what Venus Juron particularly did, and a bit of what Mars is doing, and then at the same time the various reactions that we've been getting. So I thought that this was a fantastic chapter, again, to just remind us how big the world of One Piece is. Last chapter we got a nice sweeping scope throughout the entire One Piece world, but really this chapter reminded me that even that was just like a little fraction of what the entire One Piece world is really like, because now we're getting, even Damalo Black, and Foxy, who we haven't seen in such an insanely long amount of time, it just goes to remind you that the One Piece world really is too big, that even in the span of a few chapters with this many reaction shots, you actually can't get a full-scale picture of how vast the world is and how many characters and locations that we've been to. Small tidbit on Damalo Black, I do wonder if Damalo Black showing up here, dressed as the Kid Pirates, is maybe some sort of small hint or foreshadowing that the Kid Pirates are going to make their return and that they're not done in the story so far just yet. Maybe it's just me being optimistic and hopeful for Kid and his crew, because I do like to believe that Oda had some grander plans for them. Maybe not, but we'll wait and see. At the very least, it is funny seeing him and his crew yet again. Beyond that, in terms of the actual action of the chapter, I feel like the most exciting moment for me was Venus Juro cutting Punk Records in half from a far distance. The last time that we got a feat like that was Mihawk cutting the iceberg, I would say. Some people might bring up Law cutting the mountain range at Punk Hazard. I just put that personally into a different category, because that's not so much just the sheer force of Law swinging his sword. That's more like, Law's ability in itself is that anything in his room he can separate. It's more so Law expanding the range of his room rather than the force of Law's sword swing actually being able to cut a mountain in half. Whereas for Mihawk and Venus Juro and these top-tier swordsmen, for them to do things like cutting icebergs and islands on this scale, they're having to do it just through sheer force of strength of their sword swing. So I view it as apples and oranges, two different things. I don't really compare the scale in that sense. So in terms of just straight up swordsmanship, sword swing force, this type of action by Venus Juro, it makes me think back to what Mihawk did at Marineford as the most similar little comparison. And it does suggest that Venus Juro really is a top tier fighter, especially considering how easily he was able to basically brush off Sanji, Frankie, Bonnie, and a couple of giants to boot, as though they were nothing. I've seen some people arguing that the Gorosei aren't as strong as Kaido and Big Mom because, Kaido and Big Mom, if they were on the island, then everyone would be screwed. That's not really true. For simple comparison, if you go back to look at Wano, Jinbei, Frankie, and Robin ran into Big Mom, and they literally casually rolled her off the island in a span of a couple panels. We had a whole section in Onigashima where, Raizo and Kinemon were f***ing up Kaido. If anything, the Gorosei are looking terrifyingly impressive because, 1, most of the Gorosei aren't even focused on dealing with the Straw Hats. 2, anytime a Gorosei has run into the Straw Hats, it's like the Straw Hats have been helpless to do anything against them. You saw Saturn casually freezing Sanji and Frankie and Bonnie and holding them in place with them completely unable to do anything. You had just last chapter Saturn casually just plowing through half the Straw Hat crew and moving on his own business. This chapter again with Gorosei Venus Juro casually shrugging off Sanji, Frankie, Bonnie, and the Giants. Literally the only Straw Hat that has actually been able to have an extended interaction with the Gorosei so far has been Luffy, and even Luffy literally can't do anything against the seemingly strongest Gorosei, Warcury, and right now Luffy, with backup, Dory and Brogy, are just being forced to run away because they cannot do anything about Warcury. I'm not saying the Gorosei are stronger than Kaido and Big Mom, but at the very least, I would say Warcury, Mars, and Venus Juro, who do seem to be getting the most hype and, again, the most focus, especially in this chapter. We got some specific shots exclusively of them looking really badass and terrifying. I would say at least those three have easily been comparable to Kaido and Big Mom. And at the very least, in comparison to Onigashima, you had several characters there who were individually able to either stall Kaido or Big Mom, or little groups of weaker characters who were able to do things to Kaido and Big Mom temporarily. In Egghead Island with the Gorosei, that has just not been the case. Literally, again, the only character who has been able to hold up against a Gorosei for any extended period of time so far has been Luffy in Gear 5th, and as we see so far, even that's not really cutting it. So I don't know what rose-tinted glasses people are looking back at Kaido and Big Mom with, but they had many more instances of having trouble generally against weaker characters at Onigashima than the Gorosei have been having here at Egghead Island. And that makes sense because this arc is hyping up the Gorosei to be the endgame threats for the main characters in the story. It's just natural progression of scale of villain threat. Now, most importantly, what Venus Juro did is he freed the Seraphim, because the Seraphim were the other significant problem that the Straw Hats didn't really know how to cleanly deal with earlier in the arc. And while the Seraphim weren't as big combat threats as the Gorosei are, they did pose a similar problem of being extremely difficult to damage, so the Straw Hats had to use the bubble guns, but that really was just Oda's way of getting them out of the picture for a little bit. Now that the Seraphim are out, and might be freed very, very soon, the problems that the Straw Hats are dealing with are going to escalate several-fold. Because as it is, the Straw Hats are kind of lucky that the Gorosei have different objectives at the moment, right? Like Saturn wasn't trying to kill all of those weaker Straw Hats that he came across, he was just trying to get through them to get to the Den Den Mushis. Mars isn't even trying to chase down any Straw Hats, he's focused on his own mission. Luffy and both Giants are currently occupied with Warcury, Jupiter's still on the loose, several of the Straw Hats are still occupied with Venus Juro, so if you add the Seraphim on top of everything else, then it just becomes almost too much for the Strahd to handle, and it feels like if the Gorse really combined their forces and just tried to wipe out the Strahd right here, combined with the Seraphim, then they would have a really good shot at just doing it. So again, Oda's kind of set up the scenario to make sure that the Gorse are all just split up in terms of what they're doing, because just combine the Gorse plus the Seraphim, it just seems too much for the crew at the moment. Now hopefully we get Zoro and Jinbei back in the action next chapter, because I think the Strahds are definitely going to need it very soon. And beyond that, I want to shout out the voice of the people, the submissions from my top tier of patrons. Justin Holland says, congrats, you're a prophet, and can you predict what moves all of Luffy's allies will make after this arc? So thanks, man, I do appreciate that, but I really don't know what Luffy's allies are going to do after this arc. I do think that some nations, depending on the backlash after people realize that the world government is going to be flooding everybody, some nations are going to flock to Luffy's side, so maybe Wano will officially start flying the Strahd flag, maybe Fishman Island. You get to certain countries in the in-between like Dressrosa, Alabasta, it's not really sure, but beyond that, most other nations, like I can't imagine Drum Kingdom just declaring that they're going to be on Luffy's side. I think until Luffy himself starts reaching out for help, or Luffy begins a sort of grand initiative announcing to the world that they are going to be fighting against the world government. I don't know if that's even Luffy's style, but unless some stuff like that happens, I doubt any of Luffy's allies are going to be flocking to him, at least not just yet in the story. And Zoltz had a very interesting comment. Damalo Black has taken up the persona of both Luffy and Kid at this point, and both pirates he has impersonated were last seen during the low points of their journey. Luffy after Sabaody and Marineford, and Kid after the Shanks incident. We know Luffy came back stronger after his shortcomings, so this may as well be a sign of a comeback for Kid, or solely just coincidental. That is actually a phenomenal point. That's really interesting, because the parallel is there, because we all saw the parallel when the narrator text box came in after Kid was defeated, saying that on this day the Kid pirates were defeated, annihilated, whatever. Very similar to the narrator text box that came up when Luffy and the Strahds were defeated at Sabaody. So they did hit a very similar low point in their journeys. I feel like Damalo Black, I didn't even make this connection whatsoever. The idea that Damalo Black might be like Oda's soft little way of drawing a funny little parallel to both of their situations, where, you know, when Luffy went down, Damalo Black was like, hey, I'm the new Luffy. When Kid went down, Damalo Black's coming out saying, hey, I'm the new Kid. And both of those things might be preceding a resurgence by the originals. So let's see if Kid and the Kid Pirates are set to make a reappearance, hopefully at Elbaf. I think just the fact that they're at Elbaf makes me believe more so, because that's where the Strahd's journey is heading. It makes me believe more so that Kid still has a relevant role to play in the story. So great point. And that's all for this week's video. Watch out for next Tuesday's video if you want to hear about what happened in the Void Century and what actually caused it. So look out for that video.